Welcome to the Out of the Ashes podcast. I'm your host, Kristen Willarius, and today I have Melissa Prestin with me. And I have actually known Melissa since we were 10 years old. So I've known her most of my life, but I'm just really excited to have her on here today. Melissa is 45 years old and has been going through a divorce. She has a 16-year-old son, and she loves concerts, fish and aquariums, tattoos, and dogs. She says that music is her passion and gets her through almost any situation. She has been doing volunteer work with the South Dakota Network for Violence, and that's one of the big reasons why I wanted her on here today. So thank you for being with us today, Melissa.
I'm honored that you invited me. Thank you.
First off, let's start by tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your story.
Okay. Just for a background, I was in a car accident the day after I graduated high school that left me paralyzed from the chest down. And so that's kind of the disability, and being paralyzed, I think, is kind of, it made me change a lot, but it also made me very insecure about myself. And so I got into a relationship with a guy that I worked with. We got together, and we were together for over 7 years. Throughout the 7 years, he was a very violent, physical person. And it started right away, really. I mean, because at that time, I was younger. I was probably, 27 years ago. And, we partied a lot, drank a lot. And when he was, drunk, his violence really came out. If I didn't do what he wanted and things like that, he would hit me and push me around, threw me out of my chair a couple of times at bars even. And, people would just watch, but not even do anything, And that abuse went on, throughout the whole relationship. It turned sexual abuse too. If I ever turned him down for sex, he would then force me to. I got pregnant then. I was very, very scared when I got pregnant, but I was afraid of being alone. I mean, I should have left him. I mean, there's many times throughout the 7 years I should have left him. And I mean, I know that's what anybody says that goes through that, but unless you're in the shoes, it's hard to explain why you don't leave. They have such a control over you, and you learn to hide things from everybody where people don't even know the extent. Like my family knew we didn't have even some of my closest friends knew we didn't have the best relationship, but nobody knew the extent because you get really good at hiding everything.
Right.
And so I got pregnant. He left me when I was 8 months pregnant.
Oh, wow.
I should have been ecstatic, but I took him back 2 weeks later because I was afraid. He gave me such a low opinion about myself that I didn't think I could raise a child on my own, being in a wheelchair and everything like that. I was really scared, and I knew my family and friends would always be there to help me, but still, and so I took him back. And, the abuse never really went away. And then when my son was 3 years old, we got into a really, really, really big fight outside of a restaurant. We lived out in the country, kind of a couple miles out of town. Okay. And we got into a really bad fight, and I started rolling down the road because our house was only, maybe half a mile from the restaurant.
Okay.
And so I started rolling down the road. I was just going to go home, and then he came after me in the truck and drove me into the ditch while I was in my wheelchair. But then he picked me up and threw me in the back of the truck, and then we got home. He took our son into the house, then came back out and took my wheelchair away from me and started throwing it against the garage, and then just left me stranded out there. And I finally crawled out of the truck and crawled into the house to where my cell phone was so I could call the cops. And he then called my parents and said, "You guys have 30 minutes to come get your daughter or I'm going to kill her." And we lived
Wow.
45 minutes away from where my parents were living.
Hmm.
And so they hurried up and rushed there. The cops came. Of course, he put up such a fight that they had to tase him.
Hmm.
You know, our son is out there, you know, even at 3 years old, watching this, and all he sees is his dad being, you know, tased by cops, and he's
Right.
crying and everything like that. And so they took him away, and that was the last I saw of him.
Hmm.
Press charges. Only got 4 days in jail is all he got out of it.
Hmm.
You know, and I didn't, in my mind, I was still the type of person that, even though that's what you did to me, you're still my son's father.
Yeah.
So I continued to let him see our son, even like on every other weekend and things like that. Well, then I got a call one night from his mom asking me, he had my son that weekend, asking me, and this was like at 1:00 in the morning, asking me to drive up there and get my son because he was arrested again for hitting another girl.
Oh, goodness.
So I stopped visitation after that
Mm-hmm.
completely. And then he did take me to court for visitation like a year later. And then the judge gave him supervised visitation at the visitation center here in Sioux Falls. And he was kicked out of the visitation center the first visit because he lost his temper
Oh, goodness.
there. And so my son was 4.5 or so, probably at that time, almost 5. And he hasn't seen him since.
Hmm.
No contact, no nothing.
Wow.
Which is how I want it, you know.
Right.
100%.
Right. Yeah. You know, you touched on something that I think every person who is a victim of violence um, struggles with, because people who have not been a victim of violence don't understand it. And you made the comment that, you know, you can't explain why we stay,
Right.
you know, something to that effect. And I think that that's something it's very difficult for someone who has not been a victim to completely understand. And so I think that it is something that most victims do struggle with, because they're like, but you don't get why I stay. There's reasons, you know. And I think that that's important to understand that's a normal thing.
It is. And that's like one of the worst questions that I have been asked, you know, because many people are like, well, I don't get it. Why'd you stay? Why didn't you just leave? It's so easy to leave, especially after you had a child. And that is like really one of the worst questions, I think, to ask somebody.
Yep.
You're already feeling horrible. You're ashamed. You're embarrassed that you stayed in that situation for so long. And then when you're asked that question, it's a hurtful question to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and I have to admit, when I was younger, I always wondered that until I experienced it myself, and then I totally got it.
Right.
And I don't ask that question anymore. And one of the things that I work towards trying to educate those who have not been victims that is not a good question. It's not something that we're going to be able to help them understand. They're just going to have to accept that it's a reality, and it is the way it is, you know.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And there's never the same, there's not a straight answer anybody can ever give.
Right.
On that.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about this organization that you volunteer for, the South Dakota Network for Violence. Sorry, I had to look up what it was called again.
I gave my first public speech probably almost 2 years ago, 1.5 years or so ago, and at an event here in Sioux Falls. The event was just for, you know, people that have been, you know, victims and survivors and things, to get their stories out. And I actually spoke at the event, and the director for the South Dakota Network happened to be there. And so she reached out to me afterwards because she was, really moved by my story,
Okay.
and asked me if I would be willing to, wanting to volunteer and work with her organization, because they received grants and were working on a program that directly affects people with disabilities that have been victims
Okay.
of physical or sexual abuse. And so since I was of those, they asked me if I would like to be part of that. And of course I jumped on the idea.
Right. That's really cool. Tell us a little bit about some of the unique challenges of having a disability and being in a situation like this, because things are not as easy for you to get, like, they're all difficult to get out of, but there are certain extra challenges with
Right.
having a disability. Can you share with us some of those extra challenges of getting out of that situation that you experienced because of having a disability?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously the wheelchair, I can't just run
Right.
from a situation. And he knew, I have no control over, I'm paralyzed from right below the chest down. All
Okay.
you have to do is hold my hands, and I'm 100%
Mhm.
helpless. There's nothing I can do, and yeah, I have muscles from, wheeling and everything
Right.
like that, all these years, but it doesn't take much to hold my hands down and pin me
Right.
down, and then I'm completely helpless. And he knew that, so it was easy for him to take advantage of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get so scared that things are going to escalate anytime you get into an argument. So you learn how to, I don't want to say deal with it, but fighting makes it worse.
Right.
Trying to fight back makes it worse. And this happened, before social media became big and resources and things like that. I didn't know about all the resources that were out there at the time,
Right.
to like who to contact, and things like that, for especially with disability help. There's not, I mean, there's places out there, but are not fully accessible,
Right.
and things for me to go to. I felt trapped, and I had such a low self-esteem. I felt so low about myself, and I think I just got used to the fact that, somebody wanted to be with me,
Right.
even though it may not have been in the right way.
Yeah. What finally gave you the strength to completely get out of that situation? Was it just that you finally had to call the police, and is that what finally gave you the strength, or what actually was it that actually helped you to push you over the edge, basically?
There was a time shortly before we got into that really last big fight where he was holding our son in his arms, and we got into an argument, and he went to swing at me, and in the process our son flew out of his arms
Mm.
and hit the wall. And I'm like, I can't do this. I
Mm-hmm.
have to think about my son
Yeah.
during this, that he can't be raised in a situation like this. And most of the time, everything's always done behind closed doors.
Right. Yep.
But then that last day, and like it happened in public.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, if it's gonna start happening like this, things could really escalate, and I can't do this.
Right.
For my son, all I thought about was my son, and I had to get out. I just had to.
Mm-hmm.
And I left with nothing. I left with the clothes on, a few things that my parents could fit in their vehicle. And later on that day, we took a truck up there, and the cops met us so I could take a few more items. But
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, I left everything because all I cared about was finally being free.
Right. So what is one of the biggest lessons that you've learned about life and love and being a survivor?
Communication, talking,
Mm.
it helps tremendously. Even if you're not ready to leave the situation yet, if you can find somebody that you can confide in and talk to about it, so they know at least some of the things you're going to, so when you do get the courage to leave, you have kind of a plan where you can be like, I'm going to call you, this might be our code word or something like that. But keeping it locked in yourself, in your mind, and just everything like that, all by yourself, it takes a huge toll. Because even after I left and I was away from the situation, I thought I was over it. I didn't get help. I did go to my doctor and he gave me some medicine to at least help me sleep at night, but I didn't go see a counselor or anything like that to try to help myself through it. Instead, I jumped into another relationship, which was a great relationship. We ended up getting married. We're getting a divorce now for different circumstances, but I never let myself fully heal. And then like 2 years ago, I met some people who kind of introduced me to this group of survivors and got me the courage to talk. And that's when it hit me. I'm like 15 years later and I wasn't over it. I mean, the last few years before that, my sister and her son were living with us, and I became so toxic. I mean, I was like the most angry, bitter person for like 2 years. And I just felt my life going downhill extremely. I mean, there's so many times I just wanted to die. I even texted my, ex-husband, that while he was at work, that I'm on the verge of committing suicide, and he came home, and that's when I really realized that all my anger and everything that I was going through was stemming back from never letting myself heal.
Oh, yeah.
And so I took the initiative and I started doing more speaking, doing volunteer work, and getting the help that I needed.
I found that my circumstance is very different from yours in what happened to me, but I find that I had the same response, that when I started talking about what happened, it completely changed the way I saw things.
Yep.
And so I think that that's absolutely great advice, to be able to talk about it. And don't worry about the taboo that surrounds it in our country.
Right.
Because it's not about them. It's not about everybody else. It's about who that victim is and them becoming healthy.
And that's exactly it. You hit that spot on. And that's what you have to remember when you're talking to people. It's not about them. It's not about what their opinion is. It's about you. Letting yourself heal, and you have to do what you can for yourself.
Yep.
To let yourself heal.
When I talk about failure, I always preface it because I don't see failure as a negative thing. I see it as a stepping stone to get to success. As, like the more that we fail, that means that we're actually trying and we're going to get to the success through that. So what would you consider to be your biggest failure, and what did you learn from it?
I feel at a lot of things. One of my biggest things that I think I fail at is I have a huge heart, which is a blessing and a curse. And I think I fail at that at times because I always, no matter what somebody does to me, no matter what they do to hurt me or anything, I will always try to find the best in them. And I give way too many chances than what I should.
Yep.
I mean, I've been through a lot in my life with the car accident, the abuse, a failed marriage. In the end of the day, I have a wonderful son that gets me through anything. But there's so many times where I felt like I failed him because of it, and he's older now and he knows my story. I've told him, and things like that because he's asked.
Right.
And I'm not one of those parents that, now that he's old enough to understand it, because I started to see the same tendencies in him.
Mm,
Like when he got angry and things like that. And it
yeah,
scared me a lot. I don't know. I go through days where I feel like I fail at a lot of things.
I think we all do.
Yes, I agree
I
with you
think
on
there's
that.
days that all of us go through that.
Yeah.
Does your son remember any of this stuff? Because, I mean, yes, he was pretty little, but does he remember any of it?
He remembers like the cops being there,
Okay.
but that's all he remembers.
Okay.
And honestly, I don't even know if he would even recognize his biological dad
Okay.
if he ever even saw him. I don't know.
Okay. I was going to ask if there was any lingering effects other than his anger that you saw in him from being in that situation.
No, there hasn't really been. And I mean, I think him being so young
Yeah. Yeah.
helped with
Absolutely.
that.
I just want to put this out there for my listeners that, you need to watch your kids and you need to pay attention. If they are responding to something, if there is a reaction, they're going to go through some of the same things that we as the direct victim go through in terms
Mhm.
of some of the emotional things and those kind of things. And pay attention to those things and watch and make sure that they're getting what they need as well, and that they may need to sit and talk about what they went through as well.
Yep. And you're right. It's huge. And too many people, I mean, I did it for 3 years. Too many
Mhm.
people stay in an extreme toxic relationship because they have kids together.
Right.
Kids are smart. They will pick up on everything. Never stay together for the sake of the kids. The kids are going to be way better off being in separate homes. A father and a mother can still both love their child immensely, but not have love for each other.
Yeah,
And that's what
absolutely.
parents need to remember. And whatever issues you have with, you have to learn how to separate them.
Hmm.
In the end, it's about the kids. You have to make sure your kids grow up in a loving home and are not raised around negativity and
Right.
being toxic, because that's what it's learned behavior. They're gonna think that that's okay.
Right. So what are the best resources that have helped you along the way that other people could reach out to those same resources, whether they're people, places, things, what are those kind of things that helped you?
Use the internet. The internet is a great resource now. I mean, you can Google, domestic places and things like that in whatever town you're in, and find out where you can go if you need to get out, or who you can call if you just need to talk to somebody.
Hmm.
I mean, like me, my ears are always open. If I can help just one person by talking to somebody, I consider that a huge success.
Yeah,
But you
absolutely.
you have to find a way to know what your resources were. If I had known what my resources were years ago, who knows if I would have stayed as long.
Right.
I may have gotten out a lot sooner if I knew things out there where I could have gone and who I could have talked to and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, just with the network that I work with, we have a lot of stuff online on our website for different resources where people can go or call, and just articles and things like that to help people.
Yeah. And you said that this what part of the organization that you deal with is people with disabilities, correct?
Yes.
But is there an overarching part of this organization that's for all individuals that are being in the victim of violence, or is it specifically just victims with disabilities?
The network covers everybody,
Okay.
all bases, no matter who you are, male, female, child, it doesn't matter. It covers everybody. And I just work on one chapter of it.
Gotcha. That's kind of what I had understood, and just wanted to make sure that
Yep.
I was understanding correctly what you were saying.
Yep.
So if you could step into my shoes, what is one question that you would ask that I didn't?
Probably, like, I know you kind of touched base, but like when about the failure part, but just what have I learned the most in general out of all of this? And I would have to say, just remembering that, like, I have such a low self-esteem. He made me feel like I was absolutely worthless. And I've been in that situation for over 15 years, and it still carries over today. I still have bad days, but you have to remember that you're not a failure. You know, you can achieve anything.
Yeah.
And you have to learn to be happy.
Yep.
And you're like, there's so much negativity in the world right now.
Oh,
It's sad, and I see it a lot. And there's days where I get negative. I mean, everybody does.
Yeah.
And I try not to stay in that for too long, because I'm like, I have great family, friends, a wonderful son, some special people in my life, food on my table, a great job, a roof over my head. I truly don't have anything I can complain about that's legitimate. There's people that are out there way worse off than what I am, and people need to just be thankful.
Yeah.
For everything that they have.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think touching a little bit on that, I think that so often we think, oh, well, this person has so much more to offer than I do. Or, oh, I have these limitations in this area or this area or this area. And the truth is, no matter where we're at, we have something that we can offer to somebody.
Oh, you are so right. I mean, like, even like for me now, still to this day, I'm like, with being in the wheelchair, I'm like, why would anybody want me? There is, a lot better women out there that can go and do anything. I'm limited on some of the things I can do. So why would you even want me? And then I had to step back and think, I'm not limited. Okay, yeah, there's some things I am, but there's some things that I can do. I just have to do it differently.
Yep, absolutely. And one of the things that I've learned from Melissa, like through all of this, I don't know, I think we reconnected probably within the last 6-7 years, I think.
Yep.
Probably.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I've really learned from Melissa is just her attitude. Yes, she has bad days. We all do. But her attitude and the way she looks at life, even though she's sitting in a wheelchair, and that, to me, that actually is encouraging to me. Just a reminder that, okay, there's something else. Let's change our perspective here. Because when I look at my own garbage, for lack of a better word to put it, I think, well, there's probably not much worse than sitting in a wheelchair. But then I look at Melissa and listen to Melissa, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute. No. For me, that probably would be bad. But Melissa is using that to her advantage and to the advantage of others. And that's how we all need to be. We need to look at our situation as something that we can say, okay, what good can I take out of this? How can I reach out in spite of what I feel is a limitation to me?
Well, I appreciate
kind of my thoughts on that.
I appreciate that. It means a lot. And I do. I try to remain positive. Even if I'm having a bad day, if I need to go somewhere, I will leave that bad day at home. And if I'm still in a bad mood, well, then I'll get that bad day back once I get home. But if I'm around people, I always try to have a smile on my face, remain positive, because I want people to know that just because I have limitations and I'm in a wheelchair, I do still have a great life. And anybody can still have a great life. It's what you make of it. It's mind over matter.
Yep, absolutely.
And I just try to remain positive as much as I can.
Yep, absolutely. And I think I think it's a great picture of why it is so important for us to surround ourselves with people who are different from us in so many different ways, whether it be disabilities or ethnic background or anything like that, because we can learn so much from each other.
Yep, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Well, where can our listeners connect with you and the organization that you work with? And I'll also put these in the comments on the podcast as well, but we'll just speak them over the air as well.
I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram. I can be contacted, and I can give you my email address if anybody wants to reach out to me, if they want just to even talk or anything like that, they certainly can.
Awesome. And the organization you work with is online, you said as well, correct?
Yes, it is. And I will. It's a little longer name.
Okay.
So I'll get you all that information so you can include it all.
Perfect. So for those of you that are listening, we'll have those in the notes that you can contact Melissa or this organization that she works with, and we'll have that information on there for you. But thank you, Melissa, for joining us today. It was awesome to get to talk to you.
Thank you so very much again for asking me. It was really an honor to be part of this. And you're doing wonderful things with your podcast. You should be proud of yourself.
Thank you. And to our guests, thank you for joining us on today's episode of Out of the Ashes. Remember, if you have a topic that you would like me to cover, contact me on my website or email. And as always, have a great day and God bless.